Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fearless, Inspired, and Free. I'm so glad that you're back this week to listen to yet another phenomenal guest. I'm just going to get right into it. This guest this week is, well, I'll tell you how she described herself. She described herself as a fighter, a mom, and a survivor of life. So if that alone does not intrigue you to listen further, I don't know what will. I mean, those are very descriptive words, and it made me want to know more. I wanted to know more, and I was familiar with this guest. So, funny story is that this guest and I, Michelle is her name, Michelle Wells. And she is, it's so funny because we've known each other for a span of, let's just say 40 plus years. We won't need to tell everybody all our business, but we were actually the best of friends. We were the original BFFs in like first grade, and there were like three of us. It was me, her, and another girl, Tandra, that used to hang out. But we were the best of friends, and this was in first grade. And if anyone has listened to some of the previous episodes, I have interviewed quite a few women from the area I'm from. And so it, again, shout out to the Woods because everybody was, Bellwood, Broadview, Maywood type living arrangement. And we all went to the same schools and this and that. And what's so unique about our situation is that we tended to stay in touch with each other. We, every now and then one of us will have an event and everybody will decide to go to that event so they can see each other or, and I feel like that's unique because nowadays I don't feel like these new kids, the younger generation have these lifelong friendships. They have friendships, but they don't last. And then even with social media and it's easier for them to stay in touch, which it wasn't for us. We just still found a way. They don't keep in touch once they move. So I really, really cherish the fact that our community growing up was so tight that we all still kind of hang out. We still know our middle school friends, which we used to call junior high. We still know our elementary friends. So Michelle Wells, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is, let me just look at some of the things she said. She said she's 46 and she's looking forward to seeing what 47 brings. And why that's significant is because Michelle's got a real story to tell. And every day is more than likely a gift. And she understands that more than anyone. And she grew up with siblings, like I said, in the same area that I grew up in. And she even says her block was the best and, her neighborhood was the best. And it actually was, What I know about her from reading some of her updates is that she is very independent, determined, and resilient. She's compassionate and she has a never give up attitude. And why that's important is because life will throw you some curveballs. She says, no matter what curveball life has thrown my way or has yet to come, it is up to me and what I do in those situations that make all the difference. It doesn't matter how many times I get knocked down. What does matter is that I get back up and not let the world defeat me. And those statements to me tell me a lot about Michelle and why she is such a great fit for this episode and this podcast, because what we're trying to do is hear these amazing stories, but let people know just that the world can't defeat you if you keep getting back up. So, Michelle, let's start from the beginning. I mean, we knew each other. We're friends. You had, you in particular, I think where were we at? Lincoln together? Was it
Lincoln, Little Lincoln? They called
okay?
it Little Lincoln. Remember,
Little Lincoln.
Little Lincoln. There was that kindergarten through like first or second grade, and then from there you would have to go over to Wilson,
Yeah.
which probably would have been closer for you, and then to Big Lincoln. So we met at Little Lincoln, which was literally down the block from my house. So
Yeah. So that's where our friendship started. And unfortunately, once we made the transition to Wilson, I stayed.
right,
Because I was closer, and that's when the zones went from where you
yes,
lived, and then you went back over to Lincoln
correct,
to continue. And then we met back up at Roosevelt, um,
yes,
And the other unfortunate thing is like my school doesn't exist anymore. So Wilson is now a gas station. And
Right.
that is not like great. But that's okay. Good memories. And then Roosevelt kind of switched over, kind of went across the street. So
Right.
nothing's the same. And just like life, nothing's the same.
Yeah.
So you did that. And let's talk about your high school. So we get through school and get into your high school years, and we'll touch on briefly, but you did mention to me that, you know, you did your high school years and you were young, but that you decided to leave home early. 18,
Yes.
18 and on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, I, with everything being said, I do love my mom and dad, but home life was not the best for me growing up. There's a lot of people growing up, you and many others that knew my mom and just loved my mom to death, and nothing to take away from her, but she was great to everybody, had a good, caring heart, loving heart, but living in the house was something very different. And as we got older, I would say about 10-ish, things kind of shifted in the house where things got to be very hard, very controlling, a lot of verbal and emotional kind of abuse in a way. And I know I hate abuse sounds so strong, but I think people don't recognize that as much, that words hurt and how you're talked to and what you're treated as is something totally different. And so all of us, my siblings and I, suffered in a different way. My brother, he was the golden child, so he didn't get as much of this as the girls. But I knew I was suffering a lot, and not a lot of people know this, and I will share this. But freshman year, I was pretty depressed. There was a lot going on in the house, and I just couldn't handle things. And we grew up very Catholic, and I would pray and say, "Oh my God, like how do I honor a mother like this when she treats her children this way?" And I just couldn't comprehend. And another girlfriend in high school noticed I got really withdrawn, because I'm normally very lively and, I love people, and I'm, always did things. And I didn't realize I was withdrawing. And she told me, she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm just like, "Well, yeah, I guess." And we just kind of talked things out, and that made me realize, okay, what I'm going through isn't right. And so for years, it just got really, really hard, and it got worse. And there were times when I just felt like, oh my God, not that I couldn't be here, but I just knew I couldn't live in that house anymore. And so I was working full time and going to school full time after I graduated high school. And I didn't realize what I was suffering was anxiety attacks. And I was working full time, and just had a really bad one, passed out at work one day. Didn't know it. I remember one of the guys carried me to the ladies' room, and the next thing I know, I'm in the ambulance, and the next thing I know, I'm at the hospital, and my mom is there, and the doctor comes in, and they're telling me that what I suffered was an anxiety attack. And my mom flipped out, because that's kind of how she was. And what do you mean she's got anxiety? She's too young to have anxiety, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at him, and I got all this wires and stuff to me. And I'm looking at him, like looking at her like, hey, this is why. And I think he realized that I was 18. And he's like, oh, well, it could be from good stress and things like that. And he asked her to leave the room, and I told him why. And he's like, well, you suffered an anxiety attack. And kind of from that point on, I made the decision that I cannot let her affect my life anymore that way. She was literally deteriorating me and killing me. And I was just like, I couldn't do it. So I went and got on anxiety meds, and I quit going to school at Triton, and I worked a second job until I got enough money and moved out. And that's kind of where we started. And a lot of that carried with me, all those things that went on in that house for so many years, for a long time, carried with me for that. And my then boyfriend, who was eventually my husband, and no longer married to, but when we were living together, he saw certain things. He's like, Michelle, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to say these things. And you don't realize how that affects you. And you're still doing that, even though you're not in those situations anymore. So
yeah, let me, not to, I didn't want to
interrupt, you go right ahead.
Let's delve into that a bit. So first, going back to the beginning of your story, you say, there was just this relationship with your mom, and a lot of teenagers have like these contentious relationships with their parents, but you now know that it was more than that. And
Yes.
and you say this is abuse, and so you begin to form these illnesses that had manifested into depression and anxiety.
Hmm.
Fortunate for you, you did get diagnosed with anxiety early so that you can manage that.
Yes.
And I find it very interesting that you then took this and um, kind of said early, like you were kind of stronger than I think the younger, as a young person, I don't think at 18 I could sit and like, I'm not gonna take this and I'm gonna move out and I'm gonna like build from here. And I always thought I was a tough cookie, but sounds like you just have made a decision like my life and my health matter and I
Hmm.
have to prioritize myself. And so if I have to put schooling right now on the back burner to work to, get out and do what I have to do and get better, that's what I'm going to do. And
Hmm.
so you did that. And then you said that in the relationship you were in with your boyfriend at the time, that he also recognized that there
Yeah.
were triggers, basically,
Hmm.
that there were
Correct.
words or situations that would put you back in that house, right? And so
Right. Right.
was he instrumental in kind of helping you kind of sort that out and figure that out? So how did you get over that
Yeah,
hump?
he was, and I was so grateful for that. He would just, like, if I dropped something, we were so used to being yelled at and what did you do that for? And it was like a constant woodpecker just pecking at you for like really little things. And he would always remind me, he's like, you're in a safe place. I'm not going to do that to you. You don't have to live in that environment anymore. It's going to be okay. And he was like, just take a moment and breathe through that. And I did. It's there. That was hard. And for years, you're just like, okay. And you got to take yourself out and realize, like, okay, I don't have someone over my shoulder giving me verbal abuse in that way, or that constant yelling, or that constant feeling like you're doing everything wrong.
Mhm.
And he was very helpful with that. And I'm grateful that I had him when we moved out, and there to help me with those things, because it just kept teaching me that, okay, I do have a choice. I can change this. I don't have to succumb to this anxiety and the stress that I did. And just to step back a little bit, during those high school years when I really got, really bad, there's a little story my mom would always tell me, that I was born with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. And if I was born any later, and even a minute later, I would have been born dead.
Mm.
And during all those times, I would just continue to pray. And when I finally kind of snapped myself out of it, I said, okay, God, you chose me to live, and I'm going to live each day until I find out what that reason is. Well, obviously, and more, but I'm going to keep pushing until I know. And I said, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let what's happening to me hold me down anymore, because it was just weighing on me. And I said, you put me here on this earth for a reason, and I'm going to continue to live for that.
I
And
love it.
that's really what helped push me through getting out of that depression freshman year, and building my strength for me to eventually move out. Because you're like, I have a choice, and I'm just not going to allow this anymore.
I love that. And you built your strength for a few years before you had the
Hmm.
ability to kind of, and the anxiety was basically the final straw. Like I have
Right.
to remove. And I love that. I love the umbilical cord story because it tells me that you are a fighter from birth. I mean, like you were destined to be here. So I cannot wait to hear some of the great things. So you get through that, and I'm
Yes.
grateful that you got through that. And so now you're living on your own and the start
Hmm.
of your adult life, basically.
Yes.
And it sounds like the relationship progressed from there.
Yes.
And within a few years or so, you were married, or how did that go?
So we got married, gosh, probably about 2 weeks before I turned 26. So we were together for a long time. Obviously, we met in high school, and we were living in an apartment for some years. And I actually was never one of those women that needed to get married. But if he did, I was like, okay, and we did. And we had a lot of great years together, until things started to go a little bad. But,
Mhm.
we decided to still continue on with school. We were putting ourselves through, we went to junior college together at College of DuPage. We were finishing that. We got married in 2001, and we finished with College of DuPage 2000. I'm sorry, we got married in 2000 and got finished with our College of DuPage at 2001, and then went on for our bachelor's degree together, and finished with that in 2003. And during that time, we decided we wanted to start having a family, but I was like, nope, I want to make sure I'm finishing my bachelor's first, because I know once I become a mom, like, okay, I'm not going to have time to study. I'm not going to have time to do anything. And unfortunately, we lost our first child during that time. And once I was able to get pregnant again, we got pregnant with Jocelyn, and then she also was born premature, like my first one, and we almost lost her. So I was actually on bed rest during graduation, and we opted out of going through the ceremony because I wasn't able to walk. So I was like, well, I really don't want to be in a wheelchair going across the stage. So it was just best that I stayed home. But yeah, we had a lot of good years, but we had some rocky ones. And losing our first child and almost losing Jocelyn was hard, and it
Yeah.
wasn't very easy.
So I've heard that, there's a lot of women that speak up about losing a child. And I know I had talked to you for a bit, and you said you're okay to kind of talk about
Oh, for
that.
sure.
If there's somebody you can help in that situation, I know that you wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, and what that was like, and then how, and I'm curious to know how that affects you now. I know you have Jocelyn, who means the world to you, and I know that everybody sees that love, and we're going to get to talk about Miss Jocelyn a little in a little bit, but so here's again, you're born, you have the cord around your neck, get up out of that cord, you get into life, you hit the ground running, you have a little bumpy patch in your home, in your childhood home, you get through that, you get into your adult life, things are looking good, you're going to school, you're in a great, good relationship, you guys are having a great time. You have now, you're really excited, you're going to have a baby, and you got some bad news. And what happened with that?
Yeah, when we started planning, like most, we thought it would take a while to get pregnant, but obviously we are very fertile in my family, and so it didn't take no time to get pregnant. And I'm not a drinker, I'm not a smoker. I made sure I took everything that they told me, was doing really well. I was 19 weeks to the day and went into preterm labor. And unfortunately, our baby was only alive for an hour and passed away. And that was really hard. I think when you look back and you think, I did everything right, I don't understand. And that's hard as a woman who, like, this is what we've been wanting, and this is now taken from us. And that's hard because you don't understand in those moments why you're going through that. And I've always been the type of person where I may not understand what these things are happening, but eventually I will. And whether it's a good reason or a bad reason, it was meant to happen that way. And I know a lot of people, it's hard to say how can a bad thing meant to be, but I believe that everything is in our plan. God has, in my opinion, God has our plan, and it's just what was supposed to happen in my life. And it was really hard. I don't think that no one is ever prepared to lose a child, whether it's a baby, a 5-year-old, 25-year-old, or however old that child may be. That's got to be one of the hardest things to do. And in the state of Illinois, you have to have a burial if the child was born alive. And so that's really hard. And I've raised Jocelyn to know who her sibling is, and where we go to the cemetery all the time. And it's not easy. It really isn't. And then we lose our child in January of 03. And when we were okay to get pregnant again, I had Jocelyn, and then she came preterm when I was 29 weeks to the day, and we almost lost her. So technically I had what they call Irish twins, because I had 2 babies in the 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it's hard. When I was pregnant with Jocelyn, I was still supposed to be pregnant with my first child. And I don't know if I ever really allowed myself to grieve. I think we were both so ready to be parents. And I think that was just something we chose to say, okay, let's just continue to move on and keep trying to build our family and our life together. And I think years later did I finally kind of process all that. And it's still hard. I mean, it doesn't ever really
go
away.
away.
No.
So for the moms out there, I think we all, even if we haven't been through this experience, we all need to be very kind, because I think something you said that was very important is, you said, doesn't matter if it was a newborn baby, or if this baby had been here for a while, or an adult child, or, a teenage child. When you lose a child, it's hard.
Yes.
And there's a process that you have to go through. And I think just listening to you, you would encourage, and correct me if I'm wrong, would you encourage moms and dads, those who lose, to really stop for a minute
Yes.
and grieve? Because it sounds like you kind of kept going. Maybe that was your way to cope. And then you had Jocelyn, and fairly quickly. So you would suggest that people kind of work through that process and kind of hit it head on so that they can have some. And I don't know if you believe in closure, or there's some people say I believe in closure and some that don't, but just do you feel that if you would have slowed down a little bit, you could have kind of met it and been okay? Not okay, because it's never okay.
Right.
What are you thinking in that process?
I think everybody grieves differently, and it's looking back. Do I regret getting pregnant right away? No, because I think we were just so ready to be parents. But I do think that my ex-husband and I should have had more conversations about the loss, where him and I didn't. And to be honest with you, after I gave birth to Jocelyn, we were separated for about a year after that. And during that time, you don't see what's really happening. But I think maybe that's another reason why he didn't want to address it, was because he didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't really know how, because who really does? But I think just have your emotions. I'm very big on, you have a right to having your emotions and to get through them however you may need to, for however long you need to, but have them, and like you mentioned about a coping mechanism, a lot of times when I'm faced with certain things, I get through that moment, whether it's a day or two, and then the next I just get up and say, okay, I got to keep moving. What do I need to do to keep moving forward? Because I don't want that emotion to weigh me down and to hold me back, because I know those emotions can do that, and they can just bring you down to that rabbit hole. But I do if I were to tell parents, is just allow yourself to grieve, however long that may be, because that's helpful. And to talk to your partner about that loss is important. And that's one thing I wish I would have done more, or we could have communicated better with. My ex-husband just didn't want to talk about it.
Got it. Yeah, and I can understand it's tough, and everybody, like you said, agrees differently, and they're not in the same place. And so
Right.
you work through that as best you can, but now you're so focused on being a mom because Jocelyn comes in the picture, and she also comes in fighting
Yes.
just like her mom. She
Yes.
comes in fighting, and so probably you all recognize the fighting spirit in each other. Okay, so
Yes.
Jocelyn comes in like a whirlwind, and she's going to get through this, but scary times for sure.
Yes.
You had
For
just
sure.
been through that. You weren't really sure, and now it sounds like, Michelle, on top of you trying to focus on your brand new baby, now you're separated as well.
Yes.
You don't have your partner there. And so here we are, another storm. Now, how do you work through that with your brand new baby, who obviously needs probably a little bit more care than
Yes.
someone who comes home with a full term baby?
Right.
That's hard enough, but preemie babies require some
Yes.
care, right?
Oh yeah, she was in the hospital for 8 weeks. She came home, and she had 3 therapists. So, and right before I had her, I was laid off from work. So it was just like one thing after another. But in dealing with him and her at the same time, it's that, what, he was in his own thing, and my focus was my health and our child's health. And that's what came first. And I loved him, but I loved my daughter more. And I was not going to let what was happening with him affect how I needed to take care of her. And, that was hard, because you still want your husband and your spouse to be there. But at the same time, I didn't have a choice. I'm like, he wasn't my priority at that point. My daughter was, and making sure she had the care that she did. And, I didn't care if I had sleepless nights. It's like, okay, what do I have to do to make sure that she's here? Because like you mentioned, I'm not going back and doing what I had, months earlier, and losing a child again. So whatever I needed to, that's what I focused on. And, eventually him and I reconciled a year later, but that first year was really hard, when you're doing it by yourself and getting her through physical therapy, speech therapy, and all these other things, and dealing with a preemie, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But I just always told myself, if there's a way, there's going to be a way, and I will figure it out. Each day I got up, there was a different challenge, but I figured it out, and I wasn't going to let anything get in my way of that, because she was my priority, and everything else with him didn't matter at that point.
You had to let that go.
I had
And
to.
what I'm hearing again though, that the thing that I think has really helped you in your life, and just listening to your story, this, because more happens. So, but for the listener, fast forward, Jocelyn
Yes.
is fine. She's
Yes, she's
beautiful.
great.
She's a beautiful girl to this
my
day,
gosh.
and she was, has been a performer, and on
Yes.
stage and things like that. So we'll talk about Joss too, but we're so happy that we made it through. But what I'm hearing is that, again, something very hard in your life. The two things I find are constant that I'm listening to your story is stress, and we'll talk
Yes.
about that later.
Yes.
And two, you experiencing these things in stressful situations, but there was never any ambiguity. It might have taken you some time, but you always knew to prioritize yourself. You always
Yes.
made the decision to say, I got to take care of Michelle, and then I got to take Michelle and Jocelyn and move forward. So even though a consistent theme had been the stress and some of the things that cause the anxiety in your life, prioritizing yourself
Yes.
has been at the forefront too. And so I'm really happy to hear that. So you're getting you have your baby, you kind of get her over the hump.
Yes.
It's some rocky times, but you get her over the hump. You guys reconcile for a little bit, but it sounds like that didn't last. Because
Correct.
then you go through a divorce, and then you have another life altering thing. And I don't know which came first, but tell us about what came first, and then let's talk about your next life altering
Oh my gosh.
stressful situation.
I know people are going to think, oh my God, this poor woman had never happy moments, but trust me, I did. I have plenty of them.
Yeah.
But no, we did reconcile, and there were good times during that. And during those good moments, I wouldn't be where I was today if we didn't have them. And, but unfortunately, things did not work out. There was some, gosh, how do I want to say? He just kind of stepped out on the marriage, and it was one thing I just was not going to tolerate. But it was hard. You're trying to work through this again, and I figured, you know what? I didn't care how long it was going to take. I just needed to let this go. This was another sign, I believe, that was sent to me, and it was just time. So we were separated for about 3 years, and there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of issues and struggles throughout that, like most couples do when they're separating and working toward divorce. And so we were divorced in June of 2011, and about less than a year later I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So we had just gotten ourselves back on track. We're like, yes, I don't have any more stress in my life. It's just me and Jocelyn. We're going to get through this, and we've got all this great stuff coming. And then I always joke during those times when I was dealing with everything with my ex that, okay, God, I just need a break. And then when I got those words of having cancer, I was like, okay, God, this was definitely not the break I was asking for. I know I asked for a lot, but this is not what I was looking for.
So 2011, you get the divorce. And that same year you are diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed in April of 2012. So just under a year from my divorce.
And how old was Jocelyn at this time?
She was 8.
So Jocelyn was 8 when you started your journey.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's figure out. So let's find out how was it something you were were you not feeling well? What happened? How did you find this out, and how early did you find this out in the process?
What was I? 37, I think. 37. I believe 37. So it was right before Easter, and we were just doing our normal thing, and I had a pain, and cancer normally does not have a pain, and it was a really sharp kind of twinge, and I was like, that's kind of weird. Went over to my brother's. We dyed Easter eggs and came back home and put her to bed and had another one. I was like, okay, this isn't right. Something, my body's telling me something. And I did a self-exam, and I found the lump, and I just kind of knew at that point that it was cancer. I just had a gut feeling that it was, and had Easter the next day, and then on Monday just started calling doctors, and then the appointment started going from there.
So they do, and I'm asking all these questions because I'm not familiar with the process, and I think a lot of people aren't. And I think it will be helpful for people to know. So you call a doctor, and the first thing they do is you tell them how you're feeling, and they have you do a mammogram at that point.
Yeah, so I came into my OB's office and he did his exam, and I, can tell on the look of his face. And, being a single mom, Jocelyn is with me through all these appointments. She's not really understanding what's going on. And he's like, okay, we're going to schedule for a mammogram. And he got me in right away at the mammogram because they recognized what it was. And thankfully my younger sister was my rock, and she was there with me through all these appointments.
I remember her. She was so
yes.
cute when she was a baby. I remember when she's a baby.
Cute,
Okay.
still tiny. So she came with me from the mammogram appointment on. And at that point, when they recognized it, they brought me back in for an ultrasound, and the radiologist came in. And when those doctors have that look on their face, and she explained to me that they believe that there's something, and she picked up the phone and had me in for a biopsy 2 days later. So from there, it's just a matter of waiting for the results to come in. But I knew it was. And they're like, what do you want to call us, at home or at work? I said, I don't care where you call me, just call me. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I just need to know. And between all the appointments, it was about a few weeks from when I first got into when I actually got diagnosed with the breast cancer.
Now, what did they say? I know that they sometimes say stages or whatever. Did they tell you what stage it was? And then, so did they tell you what stage?
Yeah, so when they called me, they said, and it was breast cancer, is stage 1. It was inductal carcinoma. I always say it wrong. Inductal carcinoma. So it was in my milk duct. But it was an aggressive form, and it was also invasive. So what invasive means is that there was 4 other cancers that can derive from this, which is bone, brain, liver, and lung. So I always knew if I ever faced this that I would immediately do a double mastectomy. Like, to me, that doesn't matter, just take them. And eventually that was my decision, and that's what I did. But because of the aggressiveness and the stage of where I was at, I was also it was also considered HER2 positive. And you'll hear things like double negative, triple negative, or HER2 positive, which is also not a good thing. And the estrogen level that I had was also 100% positive, which is, if you're testing for grades, that's great. But when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, not so much. So you want to have as less estrogen as possible. So that's why my doctors took such an aggressive form of treatment with me as well.
Okay, wow. So that's for everybody listening. Yeah, some of the terms you use are really important. So you said you did your exam. They then gave you a mammogram. They then biopsied, and then they called you and told you not only, yes, you did have breast cancer, stage 1, aggressive and invasive, and because it's aggressive, you going forward, whatever the outcome, you will have the potential of, or a person, not you,
right,
I'm going to speak that, a person has the potential of then having something in the brain, the bone, the liver, or the lung. And so a person would have to kind of always monitor that because of this form. And so they start you on this treatment pretty much right away. And now, do they tell you, do you get treated before you have your surgery?
So it kind of depends on your stage and how aggressive it really is. So in these years, I've been talking with a lot of women. I've known a lot of women who are used to like stage 3 and above normally have treatment first. And that means that it's spreading, it's metastasized usually. And so what they're trying to do is get that treatment to kind of stop that from growing, and then they do their surgery. Whereas thankfully I was stage 1, and I went through my double mastectomy first with reconstruction. And then once that 6 weeks had passed, I started chemo from there. I had 6 hard rounds of chemo every 3 weeks. And after that was done, I still continued on with one of the chemo drugs for a full year after that, every 3 weeks. And I've been on a daily, we call it tamoxifen, but it's basically a chemo pill, which I was on after the 6 hard rounds of chemo. So I'll be on that for still another 2 years.
Okay,
so a total of 10.
So your journey thus far has been from 20, you said
12.
2012 to
Mhm.
present. So that's 9 years. You've kind of been on this journey and you're
Yes.
still taking some of the treatment, some of the
Yes.
preventive things that, just to make sure. So you did the treatment and
Mhm.
then they presented options as far as your breast
Mhm.
and you said right out the gate, you didn't have to think about it. You
Yep.
you were okay with them taking both.
Yep.
Um, and I know a lot of women struggle with that. So hearing
Yes.
you say you were like, I'm good, like I'm good with that. Not that you didn't struggle, but some women really do that I've heard from or talked to would struggle with that. And also I think a lot of people when they hear that say, okay, so they're gone. But you know what? That there are hormones that get thrown off and
Yes.
stuff, right? It's not
Oh
a simple,
gosh, yes.
it's not a simple process, right? Why don't you tell us about a little bit how you were feeling on the chemo and how that was, and then making this decision to let them do this, how important that decision is and what things change or how those things affect your body.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to start with the decision is that, because my cancer was considered stress induced, and being a single mom and having a daughter so young, um, I never wanted that worry of it ever to come back. And I would constantly have to go in for mammograms every 6 months if I chose to do a lumpectomy. So for me, that decision was even more easier to know that, okay, if that's going to cause more anxiety and more stress to me, that, okay, we're just going to take them. And it's not that breast cancer can't come back because it can come back in my breastbone, but doing the double mastectomy gave me the best option for less chance of it to return. And that was what was most important to me, especially being a mom with a young daughter. So that to me was a no-brainer, but that decision was still hard when we talked about reconstruction, because as women, not that our bodies define us, but that's a very essence of like women and our sexuality and how we are. And so for me, I chose to have a reconstruction on top of that immediately with the mastectomy, because mentally, I don't think I could have come out of that surgery not having anything.
Mhm.
Because with the double mastectomy, they do remove your nipples and everything. So everything was gone.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I couldn't come out with just a flat chest. I just, for me, emotionally and mentally, I just couldn't handle that.
Yep.
Um, on top of, going through everything else. So that was my decision to do the reconstruction immediately. And it's still hard. You still look at yourself and, you're like, this still isn't normal. And that's what the doctors would always say to me. This is the new normal. You have to get used to yourself this new way. 9 years later, it's still hard. It's not easy.
Oh.
You still have your scars and I wear them proudly, but on good days you're like, okay, whatever. But then there's those bad days where you're like, oh, it's not the same, and it will
Mhm.
never be the same. But they're right that it's just something I have to get used to as the new normal. And as women, it's definitely not easy,
Yeah.
to make that decision to remove one breast or both breast or have a lumpectomy. And with a lot of women that I've talked to that have had lumpectomies, a lot of times it has come back and has been more aggressive. And so that was one other reason why I'm like, nope, we're just going to take them. Let's just eliminate
Yeah.
as much risk as I can. But again, it's a personal choice.
Yes. So you had to balance that out.
Yeah.
And so that was your choice. And you know what I heard again, just so you know, another thing in your life, but you prioritized Michelle. Like, even though it came your way, you said, you know what? I, I have all these options, but for me and for
Yes.
Jocelyn, this is the priority. And I think that Michelle, like, even though you were having some of the, going through life and life
Mhm.
is tough and many times, you were able to make decisions quickly because you knew your worth and your value. And I think that's
Mhm.
really important for people to hear. Like, you have to prioritize
Yes.
yourself. And you have not said, you've told your story and you said, well, the priority, and I'm picking up like this woman knows that she has to be the priority no matter what. Okay. As
Mhm.
far as your
Mhm.
mental health, as far as
Mhm.
your physical health. And so I think that has saved you. And that, and I think I'm hearing a lot that your faith too. It
Yeah.
sounds like you have lots of conversation candidly with God. Like,
Oh,
okay.
we had a lot. I told him when I got diagnosed, I had a whole lot to talk to him about when I got upstairs. Whenever that happened, I said, we got a lot to talk about. I said,
Yes,
we're
yes.
done. I said, this is it. I'm like, I know you're testing me, but I'm about done being tested. So we got a lot to talk about when I get up there. He knows it.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, what one thing I'm hearing quite a bit is that, there has to be this prioritization. I think it's one saved your life on many occasions.
Mhm.
And so, that's good to hear. Um, for anybody who's wondering what it's like, I mean, we've seen enough movies, we've seen TV, and we talk, about the chemo. But is there anything in your journey, or when you were on these meds, or when you were going through this and you were trying to be a mom, I know that had to be tough. I know you
Oh
have to
my
have
gosh.
tired days. Some people lose their hair. How was that journey for you, if you're okay to talk about
Oh,
it?
sure. I actually worked through chemo, and that was really hard, because I had taken the 6 weeks off to recoup from my mastectomy and reconstruction because I had to have physical therapy with that. So I really couldn't afford to be on long-term disability because that would lessen my income. And so I had to work through chemo, and that was very difficult. And losing my hair, I knew was going to happen. And you who knew me from when we were real little always had a ton of hair. And I know a lot of women hate their hair. I loved my hair. Everybody knew me. They could see me from a mile away just from the back of my hair, like, oh, that's Michelle. I had a ton of hair, loved it. And so that was hard to, I was okay with losing it. But when it came back and it didn't come back the way it was, and I still don't, I have like a tenth of the hair that I did, that was hard because you,
Mm,
you don't think that you think, okay, it's just going to come back and you're going to be back to your, as close to normal as possible, as they say. But the hair, I think for me, has always still a little bit of a struggle because some of the chemo drugs, unfortunately, are have caused long-term hair loss, and so
mhm.
that's always a struggle for me. I don't always talk about it, but that's something I just deal with internally. So that was hard. There were times when you have a young daughter, you're just like, oh my gosh, how do I get up and just make dinner or things like that. So I always had to kind of prioritize going into the week of chemo where I would food prep the Sunday before or that week going in. So that way, if she needed something, I could just take something out of the refrigerator or the freezer and it was just easy for her.
Okay.
But there were times when I couldn't move because it also affected my body where I could hardly walk at times.
Wow.
And, I don't try not to cry, but Jocelyn, she doesn't realize what a fighter she is and what a survivor she is because there were times when she would just sorry
Oh, I know. Okay, I get it.
would when I wouldn't eat, she would make me like, Mom, you got to eat. And she would
Mhm.
just make me toast because she was 8. She couldn't really get up and make something on the stove.
Right.
And and she was why I fought so hard, and I always said, I can't imagine kids who go through this. And I never wanted to complain about the things I dealt with because there were kids her age going through it. And I was like, I'm not going to complain. I'm grateful to actually be here and to, yeah, I may have side effects and dealing with all these things, but I'm here. And
Yes.
there are kids and people who have it worse. And, but it was hard as a mom to, put that on your daughter's shoulder. I didn't mean to, but she just did it because she didn't want to see her mom like that.
Right. And
Um,
she wanted to help you, and
yeah,
you were partners.
yeah, yeah, we were.
You and
She's
you
my
were
little gal
partners.
pal.
Yes, you were partners. And I think that I feel like you said earlier in the conversation, you said you don't always understand why something's happened, but there's a plan and this is a plan. And I think that probably your baby girl has a lot of compassion and understanding and insight into life and how valuable it is because of you. And then maybe that's a lesson
Hmm.
that she was supposed to get early in life,
Yeah.
Um, but I can understand as a parent, you saying, putting the burden. And so just a tough situation, but I feel like you guys are partners. Who else can you say at that time, who else was your support system, Michelle? Because I know it's not, you did a lot by yourself and you did a
I did.
lot with Jocelyn. I mean, I, again, I thought it was tough. Clearly, you are leaps and bounds above. But can you, looking back, is there anybody else that was helpful in your journey and helpful in
Oh
supporting you?
yeah, my younger sister, She was a police officer. Her and my brother are both officers, but they both work nights, and I'm very close with both of them. So it was really hard for her to be around during the day, and that's why, unfortunately, Jocelyn saw a lot, and she helped me quite a bit. But my sister and my brother and his family were there quite a bit to help me with that. I had a few close friends that came around and helped, but I know I'm stubborn, and I mentioned I was very independent, and
Mhm.
I always said I've got this, and I also did not want my closest family and friends to really see me during those hard moments. Because my siblings growing up, they were always like, "Oh, Michelle, she's the strong one. She's the tough one. She's the tough cookie. She never lets anybody mess with her or whatever. She's got this." And I didn't want them to see me have those weak moments. And so I had a great circle of friends with support that loved me and cared and was there when I needed it. Um, but for the most part, the really hard stuff, I trucked through it because I just didn't, I think it was more myself just not wanting them to see that and not allowing it. But going through that and after that, it taught me that I should have. And I realized it's okay to ask for help because I'm
Yeah.
always like, I can figure this out. I got it. I'm not one to normally ask for help initially. But going through that, I realized I couldn't go through it alone. And toward the end with chemo, it was just, I needed more help than I admitted to. And I started to start asking like my brother. And there was a time when I had to ask them to come over at like 2 a.m. in the morning because I was just in bad shape.
Yeah.
And that was hard.
I know for somebody strong like you and somebody who, had always been able to take care of themselves, I can't imagine how, because it is really hard for people on a normal basis to ask for help, and this is what you feel is an enormous ask.
Right.
But I'm so glad that you had some people you could
Oh,
call
yeah.
on. And I'm glad that coming out of it, your advice to the listeners or anyone that might be
Hmm.
going through this or in the beginning stages of going
Yes.
through this, get a support system. Don't be afraid
Yes.
to ask. Because you know what, Michelle, people want to help. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
and that's the thing. Like we don't think people do, but people do.
Yes.
We're like,
Yes.
"Ah, I got it, I got it." No, people want to help. They want to. If they want to, some people want to bake you something. Some people want to cook you
Yes.
something. Some people want to pick up your kids. I mean,
Yes.
they will do it. So
Yes.
glad coming out of it. That's your
Yes.
advice. I can't imagine going through it the way you did. Not for a long time asking and then finally saying, okay, enough is enough. And so um, God bless your brother and sister for that. And I mean, I love that they were there and you
Hmm.
didn't have the experience coming out of that by yourself. So I know that by now the listeners are like, dear God, you know, what is next for Michelle, right? Right. So you shared with me that on May 24th,
24. Yes.
it will be 9 years
I knew. Cancer
free.
free. Yes.
And that I asked you because I wasn't really sure. Remember, I said, I'm not really sure, this is all new. And I said, do you consider yourself a survivor? Like what do you paint yourself as, or what do you call yourself, knowing that you just went through this, battle. I mean, you've been
Mhm.
battling, but 9 years, and I'm so excited. And I feel like really antsy in my seat right now. But so what do you say? What do you say that is? And how do
I
you feel?
Well, I feel great. I mean, every year around this time, like I mentioned, I normally am very emotional because it re-triggers all those emotions and, what you went through in these times and, the support system and, like having my brother and sister and my closest friends there to help me is an amazing thing. And every day it's a fight. Every day you're surviving. And to come upon 9 years in just a matter of a couple weeks, it's like, I can't believe it feels like it took forever, but it happened so fast, if that makes sense. And I'm excited for it. And I keep thinking, I'm like, okay, here's just one more of those little milestones when they talk about when you're battling cancer or gone through cancer, that you got to first make it to your 5 year mark. And then it's the 10-year mark. And then you're just like, okay, then you feel like you could breathe a little bit easier. So each year when I hit one of those milestones, or just every year in general, it's like, whew, okay, I could take another deep breath. I can feel a little bit better about this. I'm doing
Yeah.
the right thing. I'm taking care of my body. I'm taking care of me. I'm putting me first, my health first. And I just am grateful to see another year and know that this is coming on upon a time where next year when I get to my 10-year anniversary, Jocelyn will be graduating high school, and then I'll be hopefully, and God willing, be celebrating 10 years. And I already told her, I said, we're having a big party next year.
Yeah.
So when she graduates high school and I hit my 10-year mark, we are having a huge party, because I don't always celebrate every year. I do internally at home with Jocelyn, but next year, yeah, we're getting it. We're going all out with this,
And
that
you
next year
should.
celebration.
Yes, you should. It should be an all out bang up. Just, oh my God, it should be so much fun. And I think that it won't just be a celebration of graduation and cancer free. It'll be a celebration of your life, you know, and
Yes.
all
Yep.
the things that you have overcome in your 10 years from all of it. You know what I
Oh
mean?
gosh,
And
yes.
I
Yeah.
think that that's so significant. Now, we could talk forever. And before we
Yes.
close, there are two more things I do want to, a couple more things I want to address. One, you said that it was stress induced, and I want you to
Yes.
I want you to, if there's some advice you can give to people, because we tend to internalize stress, and you've had quite a bit of stressors in your life, and you told me this was significant. So is there
Yes.
anything you want to tell people about the stress, you know, that the cancer was actually related, or stress, the term you
They
used?
called it stress induced. So I was grateful to have the doctors put in my life that were there, because my breast surgeon was part of these studies where they monitored women and stress and long periods of stress and certain factors in certain situations. And I kind of hit each one of those markers. And it's not just like 6 months, it's years. And the most common illness in women, especially women who handle all these types of stressors for these periods of time, is breast cancer. And I was not really aware that stress can cause cancer. So for me, in this journey, like Jocelyn always asked me, why did I get this? And at the time I didn't have an answer, but I told her it's because God felt that I was strong enough to handle this. So she wouldn't have it. My loved ones wouldn't have it. My nieces, my sisters. And so that I feel that if anything I can ever do from this situation is to help other women to recognize when you are in these stressful moments. I've actually just go up to people when I'm hearing them or we're talking in general and I can tell that they're stressed. I would say find a way to get that out, get an outlet, go walking, do something.
Okay.
And sometimes it sparks a deep conversation and then I'll go into it and say, well, because of this reason, you know, cancer does kill us. It can kill us, but we can also survive it. And knowing what we can do to prevent it, even better. So for women, especially, if you have stresses, you have anxiety, put yourself first. Find a way to deal with that stress. Is it walking? Is it talking with friends? Is it going to the gym? Is just sitting by yourself meditating? Find a way to release that stress as fast and as early on as you can when you start dealing with it, because the longer you let it go, the worse it's going to affect your body. And it may not be cancer. It could be something other illness. It could just be you constantly have colds or you're constantly sick or something like that. But stress is not good for your body. So find a way to
Get it out.
work through it. You know,
Okay.
counseling, therapy, that's just as good.
Yes, yes. Okay, great. So for the listeners, you know, we want to try to do some preventative things before we get sick, and not just cancer, like Michelle's saying, other illnesses as well. So walking, moving our body, therapy. How about breathing, meditation, those things that, you know, so there's lots of things that we can try. But I thought it was important that she pointed out that, you know, a piece of her journey, stress was always in the center of it. And so this was a real awakening for her. And then finally, in close, you and Jocelyn always go to Disney. Now tell me, what is the significance that you always say it's the most magical place on earth?
Oh
You
my
guys
gosh.
continue to go. I think you go annually or a couple
Yes,
times
we
a year.
do.
Like,
Yes,
okay.
we do.
So even though Jocelyn's a big girl, 17, she's still down with the trip. She's
Oh
like,
my gosh, yes. I would always ask, you want to go somewhere else? She's like, no, mom. I'm like, okay, fine by me. I grew up a Disney lover. I grew her up as a Disney lover, and Disney is very significant to us. We first took her when she was 3 and 4. And during that time, we, you know, obviously we loved it. And you know, when I was with my ex-husband, Thanksgiving was a big deal for us. And when we were no longer together, that was hard. So I decided to start and create a new memory for Jocelyn and I for Thanksgiving in our new journey of us just being together. And so every year we go to Disney for Thanksgiving. And then when I was going through my cancer journey, we had already had a trip planned with my brother and his family. And then it sparked a new feeling for me when we went, because when we're there, it just makes us feel like everything outside doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. It takes you away from whatever it is that you're struggling with, whatever is happening in your life, and the reality of just everything. And we just, I don't know, it's so hard to describe. I could actually sit and talk to about Disney for hours, but for us, it's just a special place that we've always gone. We love to share memories with. Each year as she grows, she gets to experience different things, and now we get to do more because she's older, or she likes different foods, and we like to experience all these things together. And it just holds a special place for us because that's our way of creating these memories that we will never ever forget and we will cherish forever. Like, we plan our next trip before we're even gone to this trip. Like, we're like, okay, next time when we go, we got these major lists of, we're going to eat here and we're going to go this place and we're going to do this. And now she's talking about when she's old enough to drink. So that way, because she sees all these cocktails now, and she's like, oh, wait, Mom, now when I'm 21, now we get to go do this. And then we're going to have these drinks. And it's just like, okay, can we just slow this down? I'm already having a hard time with you about to turn 18 this year. Let's not talk about 21. But Disney is definitely our home away from home. And we just love every moment that we go. And I'm grateful that even at this age, she still wants to wear matching shirts and wear our ears. And we just have a ball. She is just my little gal pal. I don't think I could have gotten through half of what I've been through without her.
Well, we are so grateful for Jocelyn and the partnership and the love you guys share, because I agree. Like you said earlier, she's the reason, you're here. And so, and she is the reason for you. And for me as an outsider looking in, I think you are also the reason. I think you've always been a fighter. You started off a fighter. And I think that together, you guys could probably take on anything. And so I'm excited for you and Jocelyn. I, enjoy the rest of the year. I know you have a Disney Disney trip to look forward to. And, Michelle, I cannot thank you enough for coming on, telling your story, being authentic and transparent, and just being willing to tell and talk through things that maybe somebody else can learn from. Or I believe that because, cancer is still here and it's still happening to people, that somebody might be at the beginning of their journey that really, really this helped them. And so I really want to thank you for that. And just love you to infinity. And I'm gonna need an invite to that party.
For sure.
Here for your 10-year. And so is there anything in closing you want to say, or, any advice or a thought you have?
Yes. First I want to say thank you, Dana, for asking me to do this. I'm very honored and touched that you wanted to hear my story. And I know we kind of talked about before. Yeah, I've had a lot of bumps throughout the road, but I've always gotten up each day and realized it's a new day. And I think that's what everybody needs to remember, is that, you always have a choice. Even though you might be in the worst situation possible, you always have a way to get out. You just have to find it and have that courage to do that. And I want to thank you for allowing me to tell these stories. They're not the best or happy, but they're my story, and this is what I've lived with. So if there's anything out there for people, I'm here, even through your listeners, like you said, to help others. If my story helps another, I want to help. I'm always willing to help. So I'm here, and you're not going through it alone. I think it's the other thing people have to remember, is that there are other people out there. And even if you think it's hard, you don't have to go through any of it alone. Just reach out and ask somebody. It's okay.
Absolutely. And is there anywhere someone can reach you? I don't know if you do social media and they can send you a message if they have a question, or anything like that. Is there anything you want to leave?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I think my title is Mickey Lee 74. I'm not sure, but yeah, anybody can reach out. It's a private account, but if you just sent me a message, I will look at it and just reach out. I have no problem with helping. I think, Dana, what you're doing to allow women to come on and share their stories is going to help so many people. And I'm so grateful that, we are still connected in that way throughout, since kindergarten, first grade. I'm like, I love it.
All the way to old broads. Here we go.
Right? I still look at you with your braids in your hair. That's why I'm picturing you as we're looking at each other right now since
My
way back
pigtails,
when,
I
your
know.
pigtails, yes.
Oh
But
my
I love
God.
you and I'm so grateful that you allowed me to come on and share these moments with you. I appreciate it. I really do.
And I appreciate you again. And we'll continue to talk.
Yeah, we
And
will.
everybody who's listening, please share this because this one was really, really helpful.
Oh, thank